And the question is this: does God save good people in the Old Testament, or does God save horrible people and make them good? So, are the people who are saved in the Old Testament good people inherently, or are they horrible people inherently, and then God transforms their lives? That's what we want to look at. And in starting that, I want to look at one particular family from the Old Testament, and this is what I want to do. Instead of using their names, I want to use what their names mean, and I want to tell the story and tell their background, okay? So, when we get through the whole thing, I don't want you to believe anything that I say unless I can prove it from Scripture. So at the end, if you have a question and say, hey, where did you get that? I want you to write it down as we're doing this, because I want you to believe the Scriptures, not me. I want you to be a Berean. Search the Scriptures and see if what I say is so. So I want to tell you a story about a man. And this is what we know about the man, that he was alive the same time Shem was alive. Now, who is Shem in the story? He's one of the sons of Noah. So this is a person who had actually been through the judgment of the flood. And this guy is alive while Shem is alive. In fact, his offspring are alive while Shem is alive, when you do the chronology. And what we know about this guy is that he was a bad, bad, bad person. He was apparently into fertility cult things. Now, who can tell me what a fertility cult is? Who can tell me? Well, I'm glad you asked. A fertility cult are people who use human sexuality to worship God. And when I say human sexuality, it isn't like normal sexuality. It's like the most outrageous thing you can imagine in terms of human sexuality. Give you an example. I think it's on the slide, but we know that this guy is into fertility cults because all their names are fertility cult names. And in fact, this guy's name means something like she shines. Does that seem like an odd name for a man to you? She shines? It's probably related to moon worship. So a lot of these fertility cults were moon worship things. And so, it's kind of like if you meet somebody, and their kids are Jerome and Xavier and Benedict and whatever, you think, oh, that's a Catholic family. Have you ever done that? It's like they all have Catholic names. These all have fertility cult names. So these people are worshiping God, quote unquote, with outrageous human sexuality that included things like child sacrifice. And they're doing that while Shem is alive. This is a bad, bad, bad family. And what we know about this guy is he and his families, we're told in Scripture that he and his families were idolaters. We're told that this man, and by implication, they all have fertility cult names. And if you want to know what a fertility cult is about, have you ever heard it in the Bible about Baal and Asherah? Have you ever heard that when you read through? Okay, do you realize that Baal and Asherah are lovers? Did you realize that in this story? So they're a goddess and a god. Baal is the god and Asherah is the goddess. But did you know that Asherah is Baal's mother? Okay, so Baal and Asherah are lovers, but Asherah is Baal's mother. Now I want you to think about that for a minute. That's what fertility cult people are into. And so Baal and Anat are lovers, and Anat is Baal's sister. And Baal and Ashtoreth are lovers, and Ashtoreth is Baal's daughter. So those kind of relations are the kind of relations that this man and his family were celebrating in their fertility cult worship. When they went to their church, quote unquote, they were celebrating things like that. In fact, the accounts of this is they would go watch things like that in their church. It's sympathetic magic, where you do outrageous things on earth and hopefully you can lure the god into copulating, and if the god copulates, you'll have productive fields, and just to make the gods propitious, you would sacrifice children. So not only was it these outrageous sexual relationships, but then killing babies was coupled with that. That's how these people worshiped God. Now, are these good people? These are wicked, wicked people. We know about this man and his family that he lived in a town called the City of Light. And we know that in the City of Light, that the worshippers there worship the moon goddess Sin, and that the city practiced massive human sacrifice in worshiping moon god Sin. That's who this man was. This man had turned to that kind of paganism while Noah's son was still alive. Noah's son is alive and saying, look, God will judge people who act wickedly. And this man and his offspring said, I don't care. I don't want to worship the God you're telling me about. I want to worship a fertility cult God. And this guy had 3 sons. Now, what do we know about every name in the Hebrew Bible? What's true of every single name in the Hebrew Bible? It means something. So if we want to know the background of this family, what crucial question do we need to ask about these 3 people? What do their names mean? And there is a little debate exactly what they mean, but as close as I can do it in the Hebrew, this guy's name means hot. That seems an interesting name for a fertility cult. This guy's name means something like donkey snort. And this guy's name means Big Daddy. Hot Snort and Big Daddy. And they're the sons of She-Shines. Well, what do we know about this family? Well, we know that Hot had a boy and 2 girls. And what we know about the boy is that the boy's name means something like cover up. I'm not sure why you would name your son Cover Up. Seems like a kind of strange name. But that's what his name means. For the life of me, I don't know what this woman's name means. Some say one thing, some say another. I don't know. But I definitely know what this woman's name means. Her name means Queenie. Little Queenie or something. And it's a fertility cult name in that the moon was the queen of heaven. So she's got, all of them have fertility cult names. She's got a fertility cult name. Now, they're living in what city? What's the name of the city they're living in? The City of Lights. Some people say 25,000 people lived in the City of Lights. Some people say 125,000 in the City of Lights and the surrounding area. If the 125,000 is true, that's the size of Chattanooga. Okay? So think of a city, a massive city, and this is the family. And what we know is that Hot died. We don't know why he died. We don't know where he died. All we know is that he died. And we know that his brother, and what's his brother's name? Donkey Snort. Donkey Snort is really lonely. Donkey Snort would really like to be married. And the one girl that just did it for him, the one girl that he just couldn't live without, is Queenie. So Donkey Snort marries Queenie. What do you think about that? What relationship is she to him? His niece. So a man marries his own niece. What do you think about that? Does that seem a little strange to you? I mean, you're living in a city of 125,000 people, and the one person you just can't live without is your own niece. Hot died, Snort married Queenie, and Donkey Snort and Queenie had a baby, and his name is Whitey. And why he's called Whitey is, what color is the full moon that you're worshiping this moon goddess Sin? What color is the full moon? White. So, like, all their names are connected with this fertility cult worship. Hot dies, Snort marries Queenie. They have Whitey. And then in the meantime, this guy has two girls. Now, what is this guy's name? Cover Up. And what we know about Cover Up's girls, what they did is so outrageous that the Bible won't even record their names. It just tells the big one and the insignificant one. That's what it calls them in Hebrew. And Cover Up was involved in this really bad thing that happened. And in the process, these two girls thought that their dad might be the only man left on earth. And so the big one comes up with an idea. She would really like to have children. And this really bad thing had happened, and she knew her dad probably wouldn't buy into it. So she comes up with the plan of getting Dad drunk. And so she gets Dad drunk, and the deed goes down, and her sister gets Dad drunk, and the deed goes down, and they have kids. They have kids from their own dad. So, the big one needed a really cool name for her kid, and of all the names she could pick out, she picked out the name From Dad. You ever wonder what his first day at kindergarten was like? So, what's your name? Well, my name is From Dad. Well, why do they call you From Dad? Well, because my dad and my granddad are the same exact person. Oh, that's kind of interesting. And my mom is also my half-sister. We have this really, really, really close family. I wonder if you did 23andMe, what kind of hit you would get on that. What's the other girl's name? The insignificant one. So she has a baby, and she names him My Kinfolk, or something like that. Kinfolk, I guess, would be the name. So let's just go over this family. Hot Dies has Cover Up, We Don't Know, and Queenie. Donkey Snort marries Queenie and has Whitey. Cover Up sleeps with his own daughters and has grandsons who are also sons, and they name one From Dad, the other Kinfolk. But he does have kind of a defense that he was drunk when it happened. For a while there, I thought he might be a bad person or something, but as long as he was drunk when it happened, I don't know. What do you think? Doesn't sound like the greatest family, right? Hot Dies, Snort marries Queenie. And in the meantime, Dad, remember Dad? She Shines? We don't know who this woman is. We don't know her name. All we know is that this woman is not his wife that he had these 3 boys with. So what would the possibilities be for this woman? Who could she be? We know she's not the mother of the 3 boys. How could we explain, because Dad and this woman end up having a girl, what could be this woman's possible relationship to this man? Yeah, it could be like a fertility cult worshiper. It could be a mistress, or it could be a second wife, or his first wife could have died. Those are the possibilities. All we know is that this woman was not the mother of these 3 boys. So, Hot Dies, Snort marries Queenie. Cover Up, From Dad, Kinfolk. Hot's dead. Who's this guy? Big Daddy. Big Daddy's lonely. Big Daddy wants to get married. Now, he could do what his brother did and marry this girl, right? But he doesn't do that. The one woman that he just absolutely can't live without. And we know this girl's name is My Princess. That's her name. If this is an affair, then this would be kind of a love child of that affair. So Big Daddy marries My Princess. And what we know is that she is 10 years younger than him. Let's say he's 25 years old. How old is she? That seems a little weird to me. Let's make him 29. How old is she? 19. And she is his what? She's his half-sister. Now let me ask you a question. If you were God and you were looking for a family that had massive spiritual potential, is this the family that you would pick? Would you be tempted to marry into this family? So do you know who this guy is? That's Abraham. That's Abraham. His name is Avram. Av means dad. Ram means exalted. So I kind of trashed it up a little bit. I meant that. But it's a fertility cult name. God says, you're not Avram anymore. You're father of a great nation. And you know what? You're not my princess. I think this is some kind of love child. And God says, you're not Terah's, you're Yahweh's princess. And I'm going to bless the one who blesses you, and I'm going to curse the one who makes little of you. And through you, how many of the nations of the earth will be blessed? All. This is a fertility cult person who's married to his half-sister. And God is coming and saying, I'm going to bless the world through the two of you. So this is Nahor. This is Milcah. So Queenie may be a little her name means queen. That's what, and it is the queen of heaven. And this is Laban. His name means white. And this is Lot. And this is Moab. From Ab, dad. And this is Ammon, which means people or kinfolk or something. Now let me ask you a question. Who's the most famous Moabite in the Bible? Ruth. So Ruth her lineage goes back to a cave where her great-grandfather slept with his own daughter, and his defense was, I was a little drunk when it happened. Is that a good thing or a bad thing in terms of lineage? Okay, do you remember what Naomi tells Ruth the Moabitess to do when Naomi wants Ruth to marry Boaz? You remember what Naomi told Ruth to do? Make sure you take a bath. Put on lots of perfume. Wait till he's in the middle of nowhere. Wait till his heart is merry with wine. Uncover his feet. That's probably a euphemism. He'll tell you what to do. What's Naomi telling Ruth to do? She's telling Ruth to do exactly what her mother did with her father. And she does it. And what does Boaz do when he wakes up? It says his heart was merry with wine. He's totally in love with Ruth because they get married by 3 o'clock the next day. He's out in the middle of nowhere, half drunk. She uncovers his feet and says, cover your maidservant, basically do whatever you want to do. And what does Boaz say? Boaz says, this would not be right. There's another who has the right to marry you. If he says yes, then you marry him. If he says no, we'll get married tomorrow. Boaz's name means here comes strength. And he's born in Bethlehem. Is there another guy in this story who was born in Bethlehem who's like really pure, who like saves scandalous people? I'm trying to remember his name. Somebody. Does God save people who are inherently good, or does God save people who are wicked and make them good? What do you think? This is not an inherently good family. This is a wicked family. And God says, I don't want to hear about that. This is what I say is true. I'm going to bless the one who blesses you. I'm going to curse the one who curses you. And through you, a union that is outlawed by Leviticus 18. Through you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. I don't know if you know it, but I imagine all of us have a diagram kind of like this. It may not look exactly the same, but if we started kicking around in any of our closets and, brought out the bad and the good, I imagine there's unseemliness there. And God says, the story isn't about God saving good people. The story is about God's grace saving anybody. Now, is this union disgusting to you? So Ruth is the most famous Moabite. And who is Ruth the great-grandmother of? David. And 14 generations after David, who comes? Jesus. When God incarnate stepped into the line, he stepped into a line that includes a Moabite woman. Includes, this guy has Isaac, and this guy has Jacob, and this guy has the 12 patriarchs, and Judah marries a Canaanite, so all his kids are half Canaanites, but they're so wicked God kills them, and then he ends up sleeping with his daughter-in-law, and his excuse, not, oh, he's drunk, his excuse was, I thought she was a cult prostitute. Oh, for a while there, I thought you might be a wicked person or something, but as long as you thought she was a cult prostitute, by all means, sleep with your daughter-in-law, a cult prostitute, a fertility cult prostitute. Every single person descended from Judah is a half Canaanite, incestuous, and yet, where is the other part of that line? When you get to Mary, it's bringing both those together, and that's the line that Jesus chooses to incarnate. To become the new David, to become the new Adam, to become the seed of Abraham, and to undo the effects of the curse. I've often thought that it would be interesting to write a story or do a movie where you told this story, but instead of it being ancient Israel, you tried to tell it with modern people. I mean, what would this family be like? What would their profession be? You've got people who are married to their own half-sister. And God comes to that group, that man, and says, I'm going to bless the one who blesses you. And the one who makes little of you, I will curse. And through you, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. God is about saving people who are sinners. God is about taking things that are not and transforming them into men and women of whom the world is not worthy. And that's what he did for Abraham. Abraham was faithful. Abraham believed. God reckoned it to him as righteousness. The longer he lived, the more he walked with God. And when he died, he saw Jesus and was transformed into the perfect image of righteousness. And this was a man who had been in a fertility cult and who was married to his own half-sister. If God can save that, God can save anybody. Okay, so what questions do you have about this story? What do I need to prove from the text? I'll put this PowerPoint, and the PowerPoint should have all the notes. So the whole Canaanite fertility cult, that comes from the Genesis commentator Victor Hamilton. Points out that all their names are fertility cult names. I did not get it from Victor Hamilton. I saw it in the Hebrew that the names were oddly fertility cult related, but Hamilton's the one who has it in print that they're fertility cult names. The practices of fertility cult you can find in any Bible dictionary. Just look up Canaanite fertility cult and it'll go through the practices. We have archaeological sites where in these fertility cults, one site has 30,000 dead baby skeletons where they were killing babies as part of this erotic, perverted sexual worship. If we ask our Jewish friends, well, is that true? They would say no. They would say Terah was an idolater, but not Abraham, that Abraham pleaded with Terah to turn. But that's not what Joshua 24:4 says. Joshua 24:4 says they were idolaters. I rescued your fathers. They were idolaters. And it doesn't say except Abraham. It says, it lists all their names, and it says they were idolaters. The chronology is straightforward. Go through and add up the years, and you'll see that Shem is alive through 150 years of Abraham. Shem doesn't die until Abraham's 150 years old. So all this fertility cult worship is happening when there was a living voice saying that God would judge evil. And yet God is so gracious that He comes to a family that inherently has nothing to merit God's blessing. And God blesses them. And God turns them into the people who are going to be the vehicle for the ultimate Savior to come. So questions or comments or observations about that? What do you find interesting about it? What do you find challenging about it? What do you find confusing about it? Oh, the way we know that Sarah is his sister. Abraham passes Sarah off twice as his sister. She was so beautiful that the first time Pharaoh took her, and God had promised that Sarah was going to be the one to bring the seed. And so when Pharaoh takes Sarah and is about to sleep with her, God shows up. And it says that God struck all of Egypt with a plague so that they couldn't sleep with their wives. And so Pharaoh gives Sarah back and gives money to Abraham. That's early in Abraham's walk with God, maybe when he's 70, 75 years. When he's 100, almost 100, the same thing happens with a man named Abimelech. And Sarah at that point is 90 years old, but she's still so beautiful that Abimelech, the king, takes her. And that time God showed up in a dream and says to Abimelech, "You're dead." And God says, and not only are you dead, but everybody connected with you is dead. Now, I don't know about you, but if God showed up in a dream and said you're dead, that's kind of bad, you know. And Abimelech says, well, I didn't know. And God says, I know you didn't know, and that's why I'm going to give you a chance. You give that woman back, or you and everybody you know, I'm going to kill all of them, because you're not going to sleep with that woman. Abimelech gets up and he holds accounts and said, look, God showed up, he said we're dead. And everybody says, you need to give that woman back. And he does. And that's the only way she's preserved from not being slept with on 2 occasions. And it's that story. Abimelech asked Abraham, why did you lie? And he says, well, she really is my sister. Same father, different mother. Our Jewish friends want to make Sarah, this woman, her name is Ishka, and for the life of me, I don't know what Ishka means, but that's not what Abraham says, unless Terah slept with Nahor's wife. I don't think that's what, I think the text is saying she really is. And either way, if Terah slept with Nahor's wife, she would still be his half-sister, right? So, it seems to me that it has to be a woman here and then Sarah is here, and that it's not Ishka. It's Sarai, my princess, and God says, you're not going to be called Sarai anymore. You're Sarah. You're Yahweh's princess. God is not saving people who are good. God is coming to people who are not good and transforming them into men and women of whom the world is not worthy. The application to me for that, would you grant that this family is a bad family? I mean, that those are like massive. Would you grant that? If God can save that, who is too wicked for God to save? Nobody's too wicked for God to save. God came to a wicked family and turned Abraham and Sarah into men and women of whom the world is not worthy. God even turned Lot into a righteous man. Here's a man who slept with his own daughters. God turned him into a righteous man. I can't think of a more horrible thing to have happened, man sleeping with his own daughters, and yet, even that wicked, God redeemed first through Ruth, and Boaz marries Ruth, and we don't know until we get to the New Testament who Boaz's mother was. But when we come to Matthew 1, it tells us who Boaz's mother was. Who is Boaz's mother? Rahab. So she's somebody who converted to true belief, and she was accepted into Israel. What was her profession before she converted? She's a prostitute. If you imagine her son, other things being equal, would you think he was prone to sexual sin or not prone to sexual sin? Being the offspring of a woman who had been a prostitute, what would you think? Prone or not prone? Probably prone. So the fact that he can wake up half drunk in the middle of nowhere with a woman that he is so smitten with, who's saying, do whatever you want to do, and for him to have the power to say it's not right for us to do that. Would you grant that that's a pretty powerful transformation? God is a God who can break the power of canceled sin. God doesn't save good people. God comes to things that are dead, dark, without form and void, things that are under waters of judgment, and God says, let there be light. And when God says, let there be light, there was light. And God saw the light was good, and God separated the light from darkness. God likes to come to things that are dead and make them alive. God likes to come to things that are dark and to speak lightness. If God can save Abraham, God can save anybody. God made Abraham a man of whom the world was not worthy. And I guess my question is, do we believe that today? Or do we believe that God only saves good people? You know, if you just dabble in sin a little and you're basically a good person, God can save you. But if you're really wicked, God can't save you. Isn't that kind of what we believe? And it's a lie. God saved Abraham. God saved Sarah. God changed their names. And God, through their union, which would have been illegal if it had happened in the later, through their union, produced Isaac, Jacob, Judah, David, Jesus. Because the story of the Bible is a story of great grace. All right. Well, I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.